Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 76, The Cloudminders.
Welcome to Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm John Champion. This is the show where we dig deep to mine the life-sustaining minerals that make up Star Trek.
Today's show, The Cloudminders.
Yep, it's the Cloudminders, where they are digging deep to mine the life-sustaining minerals that save plants.
Oh, this is the episode with Miracle Growium.
Right. They discover Miracle Grow.
A lot of people don't know this. This was actually the second promotional episode with, like a real product placement. That's what I'm looking for. The first one, of course, was Idic, and the second one was Miracle Grow. So really, you know, if they had discovered this in season 2, we might have gotten to season 4.
Right. It would have solved all the problems.
It would
have been just fine.
Satisfied the bean counters. You know, the people living in the clouds. I don't even want to talk about them yet.
Yeah. We'll get there.
We'll get there. You know what I want to talk about, though? You know what I want to talk about? Well, you know what I want you to talk about?
What's that, guy?
Trivia.
Cool. I would love to do it.
Please do.
So in today's episode, The Cloudminders, we do have some interesting bits that we want to share with you. First of all, the character named Droxine. Ken, I need to tell you that I looked all over. I searched high and low to find some meaning in the name Droxine.
Yeah.
And actually, it's the drug name for levothoxine sodium.
Yeah, you left out an R.
Thyroxine, levothyroxine sodium, and so if you're treating goiter
or naming a girl,
or treating hypothyroidism,
or naming a girl,
Yeah. So I was really hoping that after 1969 there'd be a big boom and people named Droxine, but apparently there was not.
No.
Also, we have to mention that, obviously the Troglytes that we refer to throughout the episode are a shortened version of Troglodyte, a.k.a. cave dwellers. So Spock mentions that briefly in the show. This story, the original draft, was by David Gerrold, he who wrote The Trouble with Tribbles, but he was not happy at all with the final changes made to what actually aired. He mostly blames producer Fred Friedberger. And in his original script, there are a lot of minor changes there, but some pretty major ones, too. There was originally no gas that was causing the sort of the mental drop in abilities with the Troglytes. And his ending was a little more somber, with the realization that the crew couldn't just go in and, in a few minutes, solve a whole society's problems. The teleplay was co-written by Oliver Crawford. You may remember that name because he co-wrote the Galileo 7, and he also wrote the teleplay for Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. Floating cities, by the way, I thought this was kind of cool. That's been a concept ever since at least Gulliver's Travels. And in science fiction, they really became de rigueur in the 1920s. There may be one other large science fiction franchise you can think of that prominently uses a floating cloud city. We might even just call it Cloud City or Bespin. The design of this episode I thought was kind of cool. I was sort of watching it, pointing out to myself the various elements that were used by the set decorator John Dwyer. There's the ribbon chair. Spock is sort of lounging in, designed by Pierre Paulin in 1966. And actually, there's a lot of cool kind of modern mid-century art and furniture that they grabbed from a collector and just sort of like changed it around. They just sort of moved the orientation, or they would take furniture and hang it on a wall and call it art. So that is what they did for this episode. So if you are a furniture guy, furniture collector, then this is the episode of Star Trek to watch. John Corey. I want to mention some of the guest stars in this episode. John Corey, who plays Placis, the High Advisor, continued working nearly until his death in 2002. He was extremely well regarded as an acting teacher as well as an actor.
He was actually, he's one of those guys, for people who, for whatever reason, didn't get a chance to watch this week's episode before listening to this. He's one of those guys that you'll see him and you'll say, oh, hey, it's that guy.
Yeah, he was just in everything.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
he was in everything except he was not in Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, actually,
so you think of all shows, he would end up in Kolchak the Night Stalker.
It seems like he was in every TV show except for Kolchak, including, and maybe this will be okay for people, he did do an episode of Kojak.
You know, it's easy to get those two confused.
And maybe that's what happened.
So, yeah.
Maybe he thought, excellent, I'm in Kolchak the Night. Oh, it's the
man. Yeah.
I'm going to get an agent.
Right.
Because this can't happen again. Yeah, so sadly he was not on Kolchak, but what is this, like 9 episodes in a row now that we've mentioned that show?
We're getting there.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think we stopped that when we get to the cartoon, by the way.
Maybe.
Because none of those cartoons were ever in
promises.
Kolchak. Well, no, I'm
promises.
just saying. Maybe.
We also need to mention Diana Ewing, who plays Droxine in this episode. Not used to treat hypothyroidism.
No, she's easy on the thyroid, though.
Yeah, she is. She stopped acting in the 1970s. She appeared mostly in TV, Mission Impossible, The FBI, the terrible, terrible Matt Helm series from 1975. I don't know if you ever saw it, but I'm telling you, it's terrible. Charlene Polite, who played Vanna, passed away in 1999. Just a handful of acting credits to her as well. But I do have to point out a very minor character here. Anka is played by Fred Williamson. He is one of the Troglytes, and he just has a massive, huge career, particularly in exploitation films. But he's another one of those guys where you see him and you know, like, oh, it's that guy. Black Caesar, I think, is the one that I remember him from. But he was on the show Police Story. He showed up in Chips, Fantasy Island. I mean, you pretty much name a show between 1969 and, well, now. And Fred Williamson was on it. So glad to see him here. Ken, before we get into today's recap, we're so happy to welcome Connected Data, the makers of Transporter, back as a sponsor for this week's show.
Yeah, we told people, or well, I did, a little bit about this last week. You and I have both had Transporters for a while. I'm curious, what's your favorite feature?
My favorite thing is that I have this beautiful piece of glowing technology on my desk.
Is that really it? Oh, God,
no. I mean, aside
from
so
form over function, it's crazy.
I know. No, aside from it looking very cool, I think a lot of people don't know that we actually use Transporter in the production of this show because we can share files very quickly, very easily, and securely on opposite ends of the country. And it's sort of like owning your own Dropbox.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, actually. My favorite part of the whole thing is the fact that you can access your stuff wherever you are. And that's if you... Well, I'm an Apple-centric person, so I know that's true for an iPhone, an iPad, or a computer. As long as you have an internet connection, as long as your Transporter is on wherever it lives. And it doesn't have to live where you live. I mean, as long as it's on wherever it lives and has an internet connection and you have one, you can access content that's stored on your Transporter. And the other thing that I like about it is you do that without the recurring fee.
Yes.
You mentioned Dropbox. 100 gigabytes of storage on Dropbox will run you like $99 a year. Runs me $99 a year. If you already have a drive that you want to use, they have this little Transporter. It's $99, and it basically, as you said, turns that hard drive that you have or that storage device that you have into your own personal cloud. So you don't have to worry about other people having access to it, and you also don't have to pay again and again and again to use the storage. It's $99 for one time. That little thing is called the Transporter Sync. Now, if you want a bigger one, they have 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte transporters that you can buy the drives from Connected Data. It's $249 for a 1 terabyte transporter, which is like less than 1 year for 500 gigabytes of storage on Dropbox. Like 500 gigabytes of storage on Dropbox is something like $500 a year.
Yeah.
Or you can spend $250 one time for 1 terabyte, and, that's your one-time cost, and you got it. So, more storage, more security, one-time fee. Those are some of the things I like about it.
So what we're saying is there are just a ton of benefits to owning a transporter, not the least of which is that you get to own a device called a transporter. Yeah. Which, then you get to say, yeah, I own a transporter.
I'm cooler than you.
Yeah, but you can learn all about it at filetransporterstore.com. Check out the models and offers they have available. Then when you decide to buy one, buy it at a discount. Offer code MLOG, M-L-O-G, will get you 10% off your order. All caps, no spaces, M-L-O-G. And get 10% off when you buy your transporter at filetransporterstore.com. Come with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you've really got nothing to lose. Beam yourself to filetransporterstore.com to find out more.
Transporter. Storage and sharing made simple and secure. Brought to you by Connected Data. And we do seriously thank them for supporting Mission Log.
Looking to get away? Plan your next vacation for the planet Ardana. From the sweeping vistas from the city Stratos to the historic caves from which Ardana civilization sprung. Book your passage now. Ardana is calling.
Prologue. The Enterprise is on a mission to the planet Ardana to pick up a load of Xenite desperately needed by the inhabitants of another planet that faces imminent biological disaster from a spreading plague. Upon arrival at Ardana, the High Advisor tells Kirk to stop by the cloud city Stratos for a visit. Kirk would rather just beam directly to the mine where all the Xenite is and be on his way to save the other planet. Kirk and Spock beam down just outside the mine, and they do not find a bunch of Xenite. What they do find is a rough-looking bunch of people, presumably the miners, who capture Kirk and Spock in a kind of lasso. Act 1. It's been a little while since we've had a good fight, complete with knives wielded and punches thrown. Just as it's getting really good, another group of people materialize. This time it's the High Advisor, Placis, and a couple of guards from the Cloud City. They use weapons to disperse the filthy Troglytes, the miners and other surface dwellers who would get in the way of Kirk's mission. Placis invites Kirk and Spock up to Stratos while they figure out what happened to the Xenite. Probably just being held by some malcontents, he assures them, who wanted redress of their grievances. Boring political stuff. What's not boring is that once they are on Stratos, a gem of art and architecture, Placis introduces his beautiful daughter, who immediately charms Kirk. Wait, no, change that. It's Spock, who is bitten by the charm bug, and it looks like the daughter, Droxine, is also a little bitten by Spock's cool, aloof charm, too. Kirk and Spock are shown to their quarters while Placis tries to get to the bottom of the missing Xenite. Oh, and don't mind that pointy weapon-like thing sticking out of the wall. Just some of the disruptors we'll deal with. Good night. Just then, a couple of guards bring in a Troglyte miner, possibly a disruptor himself, and he's not cooperating with the line of questioning being thrown at him by Placis. Rather than stick around, the Troglyte breaks free and jumps over the rail from Stratos. It's a long way down to the surface, and there's no parachute, -1 for the Troglytes. While Kirk naps, Spock is having an inner monologue. He lays it all out on the table. There is a huge disparity between the have and have-nots. The people in Stratos have got it all. The Troglytes working in the mines below have got nothing. Moreover, they are treated like criminals. Also, Droxine is very fetching, and he means that in a cool, aloof Vulcan kind of way. Too bad all these people can't get along, and too bad Droxine is clueless about how bad conditions are for the other people on her planet. Enough inner monologue. Spock drops by to say hello to Droxine in person. My, but they are curious about each other and the similarities and differences in Vulcans and the people who live in Stratos. Kirk has a visitor too, only this isn't a social visit. One of the women in the group who attacked is now creeping in and pointing a knife at the sleeping captain. Act 2. Kirk's a light sleeper. He knocks the knife, well, actually the same kind of mining tool we found earlier, right out of her hand. Kirk would rather get information from the woman, Vana, than just hand her over to the authorities. So naturally, she picks up the tool again, and Kirk has to wrestle it from her again. Things are going a little differently with Spock. He's telling Droxine about Vulcan mating rituals, and she seems a little perplexed, one might say disappointed by the whole 7-year cycle. When Kirk calls out for Spock, these two mismatched couples get together where we reveal a little more about the division on this planet. The Troglytes are not invited at all to share in the spoils of art and culture on Stratos because simply they couldn't handle it. At least Droxine believes so. She sees it as a balance. Some people work while others learn and relax. There is no violence on Stratos. Except for the torture Plassus is now inflicting on Vanna. Spock and Kirk arrive as the torture stops, and Spock even attempts to break through to Plassus and Droxine that the Troglytes should be treated humanely. They can be taught and treated as equals. Kirk is a little more pointed. They have to stop. And they don't even want their lousy Xenite if it comes from torture. They return to the Enterprise, and Plassus gives the order to his guard that Kirk should be killed if seen in Stratos again. Act 3. Time is running out to get the Xenite to Merrick 2, and Kirk is considering breaking the rules and going right to the Troglytes to get what he needs. McCoy jumps in to remind Kirk that the Troglytes are mentally inferior, but he knows why. The Xenite, in its raw form, emits a colorless, odorless gas which retards their intellectual growth. They are all the same species, but the Troglytes have a disadvantage from their environment that the city dwellers don't. Now armed with a little science, Kirk contacts a high advisor, but he's not interested in hearing about how the use of a simple gas mask could help the whole situation. Kirk is going in anyway. He beams himself into the room where Vanna is being held, and he tries to reason with her about their discovery of the gas. He offers gas masks for all. He'll even come back and help the Troglytes work things out with the city dwellers. Vanna agrees reluctantly, and they escape to the mines where she will show him the hidden Xenite. As soon as they get to the mine, though, Vanna has Kirk held by 2 guards, removes his protective mask, and then forces him to work the mine, digging away at the ore. Act 4. Spock is in command of the Enterprise, and he's pretty sure that things are not going well on Ardana, but he can't do anything about it. Vanna has a hostage, Kirk, at phaser point, and she sends the mask to Plassus to show her hand. In a moment, Kirk overpowers her, though, and when he gets his phaser back, he blasts the rock, entombing them in the mine. Now that he's got the upper hand, Kirk radios Spock and has the High Advisor beam directly to them in the cave. Don't believe the results of our study? Well, it's time that you became part of the experiment. Plassus is minding his own business while Droxine is still a little giddy over Spock. She's hoping he'll come back and sign the 8x10 she has in her bedroom. Plassus says it's just best to forget him. He's got to get onto other things like torturing the Troglytes. Before he knows what's happening, Plassus finds himself beaming into the cave where he encounters Kirk and Vanna. Kirk is a little twitchy, and when he forces Plassus and Vanna to dig for Xenite, they start getting a little loopy too. The Xenite gas is definitely having an effect when Plassus lunges at Kirk with a couple of those digging tools. Vanna sees what's going on, and she grabs Kirk's communicator to call Spock. Thinking fast, Spock has them all beamed up where he can break up the fight. Remember that gas that's making you loopy, irrational, and violent? Yeah, stop that. Back on Stratos, Spock is saying goodbye to Droxine. She's adjusting to the idea of wearing a mask to find out what life is like in the caves. Vanna has a Xenite delivered to Kirk, and she reminds Plassus that things are about to change now that her people will no longer suffer the effects of the Xenite gas. There's some bickering, but Kirk offers to send in the Federation to help mediate. The end.
Do you think Stratos stays in one place the whole time?
You know, I was wondering that. It kind of seemed that way, but from the effect shot, and by the way, I didn't mention the effects in the trivia because, you know, some people watch the remastered, some people watch the original. We usually watch both. But you see a little movement of the planet underneath if you're watching the remastered version. Yeah. Which I thought was kind of cool. Yeah. So even though it looks stationary, I feel like there's got to be at least a little movement.
You've got to know, by the way, I thought I had made this clear before. You watch both, and God bless you for doing it. I watched the remastered just because that's what I have. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
Well, and we figure that most people have that accessible to them faster than they would have the original.
Right.
But this is an interesting episode for that because Cloud City obviously is the biggest effects piece in this episode.
Yes.
And it's kind of cool. The original is made exactly as you would think. It's bits of foam and wood stuck together with glue and painted and hung from the ceiling on cotton.
Nice.
You know, I mean, but then they really kind of honored the original style when they did the remastered version.
Yes,
so
they did.
It's kind of cool, but it has that like Flash Gordon
place
Cloud
makes
City
no
look.
sense at all.
No.
This makes no sense at all. And even in the remastered, they weren't even. I mean, because Bespin makes no sense. Well, the city around Bespin, it is called Cloud City, I think. But the city around Bespin makes no sense. But it's got that sort of like thing that hangs on the bottom. Yeah. And you know, it's like, okay, so is that mining gas? Is that sort of keeping the whole thing steady? Is that a fin that helps it move around? We don't know. But there's enough there that you think, well, that might make sense. And Stratos is just like, what if we took a city block and levitated it?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, even in Flash Gordon, I believe Voltan's city has little rockets firing underneath it to keep it afloat.
See, that's a bad use of resources right there.
Yeah. I just kept thinking, you know, a Cloud City seems like a great place to live until it's not. You know, like this is a great idea until that one day.
Yeah.
But it's just not a good idea of a place to live.
Ask Nick Fury about that.
Yeah, right.
You know, he's got this whole
all about
floating fortress. What could go wrong? I got 4 engines here. And I can even lose 2 of these engines and not be, Yeah, that's kind of...
that thing is diesel powered because, I mean, either way, it's just a bad...
I will say, I would imagine that the people of Stratos have absolutely no problem with waste management.
Yeah, that's true. Boy.
Off the side, just off the side. The Troglytes, on the other hand, may have a little problem with the waste management of Stratos.
Yes, I think they would.
Yeah.
Hey, did you notice at the beginning how Shatner's lips didn't even move during the first line of Act 1?
Yes.
He's that good.
Yeah.
He is that good. Yeah.
Who are you? What is the meaning of this attack? You think he was trying to distract them? You think he was thinking maybe they won't realize that they'll think someone else is talking?
Yeah, but who's the guy over there that's talking to us?
Exactly. He's not moving his lips. Surely he is not. I am an idiot, of course, living in the caves, so it wouldn't even occur to me that he might be throwing his voice, or that they might have said, maybe we should dub something in here, because that's a long line for him to be standing staring at them.
Yes. There are versions of this episode where that is just cut out entirely.
Yeah.
Depending on where it aired.
Those might be good versions.
They might be.
Forgive me. That is a very small thing to bash, and it may be one of the only things that we actually bash. We poke a tiny bit in this part of the show, but that's for me to say that would be a better episode is like saying, Citizen Kane would be great if they had cut that one frame.
Right. Yeah. For all of you who are new to the show, this is a section where we have fun. Right.
We don't have fun for the rest of the show. So
no. It's just very academic after that. By the way, something that I won't bash, though, Droxine, makeup by Lucira and Natira. I'm glad that they teamed up to do her eye makeup. Yeah. Costume by Magic.
Yeah.
Just because there's no other explanation how that would work.
Stick 'em.
Yeah.
I think that would be it. There's liquid latex going on somewhere around there.
Glue and Velcro.
Exactly. Hopefully not hot glue, because ow.
No, but yeah.
Hey, I got a question.
Yeah, do it.
How can Spock hear Droxine quietly preparing refreshments, but he can't hear somebody trying to kill Kirk?
Right.
Nor hear that Kirk is kind of like, Kirk seems awfully affectionate with his attacker. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was sort of like a date.
Right. They date differently on that planet.
Although, they do actually, maybe above and no, that was Kirk dating. That was not Vana dating, because Vana's like, let me go, and he's like, hey, no, I'm kind of grooving on this.
Well, as long as you're here.
On Stratos, though, they are pretty quick, because Droxine has gone from, so you guys are smart. And then we cut away for 1 minute to Kirk on his date with his attacker. And then we come back and she's like, learning about Pon farr. It's been 30 seconds. And Spock's not walking around going, by the way, we can't do it unless you're on Vulcan in 5 years.
Yeah. Pon farr, the thing that he cannot tell his captain about. He's like, hey, Droxine, Let me tell you how this goes down on Vulcan.
Yeah, I would really like to hang out with you. I would really like to, but I can only do that every 7 years.
Although it's interesting, he says they can only do that every 7 years unless
there's a pretty
the woman
girl
is particularly beautiful.
Right? If there's a pretty girl, yeah, he gets a shot of Droxine, and
wow,
it sounds like a medicine. Well, because it is, as you said before.
It is.
That's right.
Which then again raises the question of why Spock says in his monologue, Droxine, a very appropriate name for this woman. Okay, sure,
why not? Yeah, he had a little bit of McCoy-itis in this episode too. Rod was pointing out earlier that this is like, so what's his name? The high ambassador or supervisor or whatever.
Placis.
The old guy, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, meet our greatest work of art, my daughter. And she's like, oh, I've never met a Vulcan. And he says, I've never met a work of art.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. Because that's usually like a Bones kind of thing to do, right? Like, man, you're pretty.
Well, first of all, it's strange to me that he would introduce his daughter that way. Like, that just seemed a little... strange,
but she's available for parties, by the way.
I know, right? I mean, that's kind of what it felt like. But
hey,
then
Starship Captain, she's single. All right, go ahead.
But remember that line. Because if you're ever presented with the ability to retort with, "I've never met a work of art before," then you use it. So I think Spock had been holding on to that for a long, long time.
Probably had.
Probably learned it from McCoy.
Yeah.
Speaking of McCoy, there's a line. He says when he's on the bridge, he goes, I had the sample of xenite sent up from the surface. And I'm thinking, by whom and when? And why not just call them back and say, can you send us 1,000 more of these little samples?
Yeah, got any more of those samples? Maybe I could use? Yeah. I'm also curious how he knows without opening it that opening it would have been detrimental to the ship.
Yeah, right.
Unless he can just, sort of see that through the glass.
Yeah.
Oh, this looks terrible.
I want to point out a couple of technical things that I thought were kind of weird in this episode. When they're all standing, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in the transporter room, looking at the feed coming from Ardana, they're talking to Placis. That is a really weird angle that we get from the camera where they created like this little false low ceiling. And I don't know if it was meant to be the POV of Placis, like seeing the edge of the monitor, but it was a very weird shot. And then we never saw that shot again because that is an odd angle that we get from the transporter room anyway. We usually would never see that far into that back wall. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that overall, this episode has some very weird editing, some strange like overlays and jumpy transitions, just stuff that really makes no sense at all. I thought Spock's VO was strange to begin with, that we would do that at all. I'm very curious what the thought process was that they had to put that in, and then to do that with the sort of montage, Droxine and then Vana and the city and then the mines. It felt very odd.
Might it have been an homage or an homage to earlier works? I mean, is that possible?
Yeah, well, could be.
Yeah, it's been a long time since. I know you're going to talk about Metropolis later. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember some very like close-ups of faces and things like that. I mean, it might have been homage. It might have also just been they needed to spend a little bit more time. Or it could also be that they just felt like they had to explain stuff, but you can't just sit there with Spock's lips not moving, because we know how well that worked out in the prologue.
Right.
You can't just sit there with Spock's lips not moving, but just looking at Spock thinking.
Yeah.
You gotta do something. We could have had him doodling, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll tell you what's weird about this episode to me.
Sure,
well, there's lots, but the mining tool that Vana tries to use on Kirk on their date.
Right.
She hits Kirk's wrist with that like 3 or 4 times. And this is not an effective weapon for killing. I guess that's really what I'm saying. Because, I mean, after their tussle, his sleeve isn't even hurt, let alone, his hand. Yeah. And then later, when the advisor asks, when they're trapped in the mines and the advisor comes at him with the Mortes, I think they're called, when he comes at him with the Mortes and asks if Kirk is as good with a Morte as he is with a phaser, Kirk says, they'll both kill. I don't think so.
No. I mean, all I could think of was seeing that Morte jabbed into the wall during Act 1 was those have got to be some really thin walls.
Yeah, no, the reason that the disruptor who put that in the wall was not able to complete his mission was because he was too tired trying to jam that into a wall.
You're exactly right.
Now,
yes.
what is it? Lucite? What's the stuff that they're mining? I've already forgotten.
Oh, Xenite. Yeah.
I'm almost done with this episode as far as you're concerned. The Xenite, you don't even need a tool for that. He's just like, here, Kirk, use your hand. And Kirk's like just pulling the stuff off with his hand. Why do they even give them tools?
Yeah, we extract it from the magnificent styrofoam mines of the planet Ardana.
Yes, so, Styrofoam would have been a great name for that guy's daughter, too.
Yeah, right. This is a rare episode in the original series where we get to see a little more transporter with no transporter room, where they move Placis from from the little platform in Stratos just directly into the mine. I thought that was kind of cool. And,
no, they didn't. Wait, no, they didn't.
No. Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. They beam him up and then push him down. Yeah.
They're very much like the Man in that respect. They beam him up and then they push him down.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And speaking of the Man, we learned about a new piece of bureaucracy.
Yep.
The Federation Bureau of Industrialization, the FBI.
Yes.
Coming in as the mediator.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't pick up that it was FBI. That's so funny. You talked about the actors in this episode. I feel like you left out an important one. It was really great to see the Lights of Zatar getting a cameo here.
Oh, yeah. I was so glad to see them used as a torture device.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Powering the Ray is there.
Yeah.
I do have one thing, and this is just more of my, sort of dyed-in-the-wool geekiness. When Vana turns on Kirk and Kirk is wearing the mask. Again, if you have not seen this, then this won't mean quite as much to you. But I wanted him to say, theatricality and deception are powerful agents to the uninitiated. But we are initiated, aren't we, Vana? Members of the League of Shadows. Because he looked.
Yeah. Kenray, everybody.
Straight up, like Bane.
Bane. Yeah. That was a good...
It was all right. It was all right. I had it written down. Turns out I've been saying it wrong for like a year. I went back to double check the quote, and it turns out, my wife will be happy that I'm finally getting that right. And the one last thing, it's kind of embarrassing. It's a terrible thing to say about somebody who's passed on and who did a fine job in this episode, but the Supreme Advisor has VPL.
I never even noticed that, even in high def.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you'd think, if they're going to go to all the trouble of remastering.
Yeah, right. That you can remove that digitally now, so I'm told.
Oh, well.
Looking to aid in the fight for equality? Plan your next mission for the planet Ardana. The ruling class looks down, literally, looks down, on the working class, every minute of every hour of every day. The times, they are a-changing. Ardana is calling.
I would imagine that John is likely to agree with me on some of what I'm about to say and do. I would imagine that he will. But hate mail's going to come to me, and let it. Bring it. No, it's okay. I'm okay with this episode because I firmly believe what I'm about to say. Generally speaking, we try to converse in this part, John, and I appreciate that. But I just want to read out a bunch of stuff because I went on this sort of stream of consciousness typing thing when we were watching, or when I was watching this episode. It takes Spock about 8 seconds to realize that the imbalance on this planet is bad. It's worse than bad. It is unsustainable. So I'm curious how the Federation has never noticed this.
Yeah, that bothered me too.
Yeah. Now, Kirk is willing to ignore the plight of the Troglytes entirely, it seems, until it's right in his face. It's kind of interesting. The advisor, says, oh, they're disruptors. And Kirk's like, why are they disrupting? And he says, well, they have demands. And Kirk's like, what are the demands? And the advisor says, nothing for you to worry about. And Kirk says, excellent. Where's my plant spray? Right? I mean, he's fine letting it go until he can't. I mean, until it's actually in his face. So Spock's already seen it, and he's trying to figure out, how this is going to go down. And Kirk almost seems to want to be ignoring it until he can't ignore it. Although he's not as bad as the people in Stratos.
Right.
This is an absolute bonk on the head episode. Almost as much as Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. And yet, the idea that it presents, one that it seems to me is woven into the fabric of Star Trek, is one that people will readily argue against and do on a daily basis. That people in every stratus of every society should be treated fair and equally and be given, and I'll underline that word, given opportunity. Now, I'm not saying they should be given everything that they need, although you could make an argument that a decent society would make sure that that happens to members of its own society, but they at the very least need to be given opportunity.
Right.
Also, the idea that the rewards of a society should be shared among every member of a society. Now, this is not something that every episode of Star Trek plays out, nor is it even an idea with which every episode of Star Trek meshes. You, I think, accidentally mentioned... Oh, no, that wasn't you. I'm sorry. We were talking before the show about the Horda. The miners are there for a reason. Go back to Mudd's Women. The miners are there for a reason. They're going to get rich. And yet we're also constantly presented with this idea in Star Trek that, you know, money's not a thing anymore. Well, it is. But it does seem to be an idea and an ideal inherent in the show's philosophy that it's actually not. And that we don't have to have the kind of struggles that the people of, that the Troglytes are having against Stratos at that point, right? Now, I feel certain that I will be called a lefty, whatever, on this, but that is, it seems to me, exactly what this episode is saying. They even go on later to say that the poor and downtrodden are not poor and downtrodden because that's just the way it is and some things will never change, but rather because the situations in which they are kept keep them that way. Now, it's interesting to me that you said that David Gerald did not like the fact that there was gas there.
Yeah.
The gas actually makes perfect sense to me in this episode.
Really?
Yeah. Well, Bones comes in and says, don't bother with the Troglytes. They're 20% less intelligent than the people of Stratos. And Spock's like, yeah, you're 20% less intelligent because there's no way that that's possible. They're the same people from the same planet. Now, as you said, Bones knows what's going on. What's weird is he was like, don't even bother talking to them because they're idiots. Oh,
and by the way, I know why.
I know why they're idiots. Right. Yeah. And I can cure them. Yeah. Turns out that Bones knows what's affecting the Troglytes. It's their time in the mines. And he also knows that taken out of the mines for a while, they can operate at the same level as the people of Stratos. Now, one has to assume, or at the very least wants to assume, that he wrote off reasoning with the Troglytes, that Bones wrote off reasoning with the Troglytes because time is of the essence. They have less than 12 hours to get the Xenite to Merrick 2. And that's maybe not enough time for the effects of years of raw gas emitted by the Xenites to be washed out of their system. If you want to put that a different way, you can physically take the child or adult out of the system that has kept them malnourished, undereducated, and without readily available opportunity for advancement in a moment's time. But you can't take the system that has kept them malnourished, undereducated, and without readily available opportunity for advancement out of the child or adult who's been in it for years quite as quickly. Now, let me wrap all that up by saying, lefty loosey, righty tighty, you know I'm fun at a party. No, I can't afford to throw it. But I will make it interesting if you invite me.
All very well said, Ken. And here's the thing. First of all, the David Gerald story, you can read actually quite a bit of that online if you search just David Gerald and Cloudminders. He's done a few interviews where he talks about how that script changed and what his intentions were. He actually, I'll just give you a very, very brief summary, but there's a lot more to it than what I'm about to say. He actually had the Troglytes kind of divided into two factions, some who were following sort of a more violent revolutionary path. He had kind of cooked it up in his brain as like a Malcolm X figure, and then another group who were more pacifist revolutionaries, more of like a Martin Luther King approach on changing the societal differences. So he had more of a political thing going on there as well. But I think his whole point was, well, when you introduce the gas, then you're just saying, here's this thing that we can turn off, boom, we're done, and then we fixed it. Now, to their credit, though, at the end of this episode as aired, we see Vana and Placis already at loggerheads with each other.
Yes. So, well, honestly, I like the fact that it is something that you are saying it is something you can turn off. Because then you have to address the fact that, yeah, but we're not gonna. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I honestly, I like from what you've just told me, and I do have to go back and do the reading that you were talking about, but from what you were just told me, I do like his other treatment of it as well. This is, I've joked before about bad episodes that make me want to read the novel, like, the one with the computer. Yeah, because there's only one.
There's only one, yes.
The one with Red Hour.
Landru.
Yes, Landru.
Return of the Archons.
Yes. Okay. I've said that I wanted to read Return of the Archons, like the novel of that before, because it feels like that would make it a good episode in a way. This is a good episode, but I really found myself wanting more. And not in a bad way, but in a, wow, I want to know, okay, so like, first of all, was it just that the people of Stratos were lazy? Did they leave the cave because they were like, I'm so tired of living in a cave and working and nuts to this, I'm leaving. Then they get outside, they breathe the fresh air, and they're like, oh, I have an idea. I'm going to keep those people working and I'm going to go do something else. Or was it more like the, as They Might Be Giants says, the allegory of the people in the cave by the Greek guy, where, they go outside the cave. Maybe the earliest people who would eventually go on to found Stratos came back in and said, we've been a bunch of troglodytes. Why don't we go outside? And the troglodytes were afraid of what was outside. And so they stayed there, How do you get, and how do you get from basically Mr. Ugg, digging in a cave to building a cloud city?
Right.
There's a tremendous amount here that I would love to just explore more. If only the guy who wrote the original story felt he could write novels.
If only.
Yeah, we should send him an anonymous email.
Yeah, hey, could you write a novel of this? Yeah,
please. I'll be your friend.
Well, I think the thing about your monologue at the beginning of this section, which again I very much appreciate, is that in very simple terms, this is something that helps to continue the definition of this 23rd century world that we're depicting. We're trying to depict, or Star Trek is trying to depict, this world where people do have equal opportunity, where there is less of an emphasis, even though we see that things have value, there is less of an emphasis on ownership and accumulation of wealth solely for the purpose of accumulating wealth. So I don't think there should be anything too terribly controversial about what you said, because to me this fits in very nicely with our understanding of what this Star Trek world is. Of course, a Federation ship would show up. Of course, it would show up and see this kind of economic disparity and go, oh, wow, this is not the way that we want things done, particularly not for a Federation member planet. Which again goes back to the surprise that nobody would know about this disparity yet. Yeah.
No, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything sort of surprising about the fact that Star Trek would want Star Trek to be that way. I think where it becomes an issue is when you sitting in the 20th or 21st century or 22nd, maybe, I don't know how things
whenever
are
we're
then.
recording this. Yeah.
That you would say that's how things should be here. It seems like anytime we step out of something that's like, somebody shouldn't step on a bug that's actually an intelligent being, or nobody should make fun of Vulcans. I mean, it seems like anytime we go any further into Star Trek is saying how society should be, somebody will write to us and say, you're ruining Star Trek.
Right.
And my thought is, if you're watching Star Trek without seeing that Star Trek regularly says how society is being or how society should be, you're ruining Star Trek. Or you're wasting your time. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I just, I thought you were going to get some of the hate mail, and now, no, I just brought it all back to me. Oh,
That's okay. You go right ahead.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Okay, so the subject matter, the topic, and you mentioned earlier that I was going to mention Metropolis. And absolutely, we have to mention Metropolis.
Yeah.
1927, Fritz Lang's magnum opus. If you haven't seen it, please do. There are some great DVD and Blu-ray restored versions of that movie. But the thesis of that movie is summed up in the line, there can be no understanding between the hands and the brain unless the heart acts as a mediator. And you have the exact same thing. You have this rich ruling class who operate only at their leisure. They have every technological advancement. They have the time and the freedom to do whatever they want. They live in these massive skyscrapers, totally removed from the surface. And then you have the poor downtrodden workers who brilliantly in the movie move mechanically. They all look the same. They all go to work and leave work the same way. And they're just moving machinery. And it's just mind-numbing, repetitive work. And then you have, spoiler for a movie that's nearly 100 years old. But then you have a revolutionary.
What?
I know.
Dude, I was going to watch that this weekend.
Well, I didn't tell you who the revolutionary is.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I'm going to start singing How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, though.
Oh.
Which may or may not have anything to do with what you're saying.
May not have anything to do with it. But that is that's sort of the bonk bonk on the head moment, as you would say, that you can't maintain this kind of civilization. You have to have some compassion, some humanity to treat others humanely. So, of course, Metropolis played in a big part to my filtering this episode.
You don't necessarily have to have that, though.
No, not at all. Not at all. But they're very nice parallel stories. They're very nice companion pieces, I would say.
Well, no, I'm saying I think it feels like we've found a way in society today to get around, keep people thinking that they can always get rich. I mean, that's basically it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and the thing is, people can get rich. I mean, that's the deal, too. Not to make it all about money. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, there are countless stories of people who pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps and made it to the top. And those stories are true. The problem is you've got almost as much chance of winning the lottery. I mean, there's so much stuff that goes into all of those things coming together.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, you know, I don't want to be the, 99% 1% guy or 97% 3% or whatever you want to say it is.
Yeah.
There are opportunities out there, but it seems to me that they need to be made easier. And when you say you can't have a society that's sustained this way, you can. You just have to offer enough hope. Wow. Going back to Bane, actually. That was the whole thing in The Dark Knight Rises, was Bane was saying, how I'm going to keep these people in control by letting them think there's a way out. Mm-hmm. And maybe even, that was the idea of the Running Man as well. Oh, things are terrible. But here, watch this. Somebody's actually going to go to Tahiti. It's a magical place. No, I'm sorry. That's a different thing entirely. I'm going to see how many different references from science fiction and superhero stuff I can get into this episode.
That's all of them.
Yeah, getting close. So, I mean, when you say that you can't do that, I think eventually you're right. I think eventually people sort of, get hip to the idea that this game is rigged in a big way.
The pendulum swings. I mean, we see that every... not every generation necessarily, but you see that historically. You see that the pendulum swings, and then there are either large or small revolutions to try to shake that up.
But we've never had the level of technology that we have today. I mean, as you and I record, I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing. The old Bruce Springsteen song was fantastic. 57 channels and nothing on. Well, yeah, because you've only got 57 channels. My goodness, we've got 500 now. I want to watch something about guys who make duck calls. Well, I want to watch something about guys who drive trucks on ice. Well, guess what? There is something for you and for you. Well, I want to watch a soap opera. There's a whole network for you. You're kidding me. I mean, I mean, we've got so many different ways to distract us at this point that it sounds like I'm calling for something, and I'm not. I'm wondering if the kind of thing that you're talking about when you say we have revolution every generation. First of all, I'm not saying that revolution is what's needed necessarily, but second, maybe not, depending on how advanced you are or where you are.
Interesting. Yeah. I want to talk about some of the other topics, because there are many that were raised by this episode. We've seen this a little bit before in Star Trek. Maybe going back to Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, but the kind of justification used by Placis in describing how very different the Troglytes are. He lowers them to something other than what they are. Even though Spock calls it out, he says, "Well, look, evolutionary." From that perspective, biologically, they are the same. They are the same species, and there's really no other explanation for that. But Placis says they are incapable of the kind of thought that has raised his people to the lofty artistic lifestyle that they enjoy. And that is a justification used in all kinds of mistreatment of other human beings, just to say, well, they are different, they are incapable, therefore we shouldn't even try. So I was not surprised to see that come back in this episode.
Did you think that Placis believed it? I mean, Kirk actually accused him at one point when Placis says, we're not going to let him use the masks. Kirk says, wow, will you not let them use the masks because you don't think they'll work, or because you're afraid they will? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think Plassus knew, or do you think he was blind to it?
Well, I am kind of a mind that he was blind to it. I think you could make a good case either way. You could make a case that he knew and was simply doing everything he could to maintain that kind of status quo. Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he knew before the episode, but I mean, once it's presented to him, he's not interested in knowing at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a shocking thing to have an outsider come in and say, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing can be fixed, and here's how. Because that kind of goes into my next point, the blindness to reality going on in this episode, which again we've seen before. We talked about a little bit in The Way to Eden. The High Advisor is blind to the cruelty inflicted on the Troglytes. The Troglytes, or at least in the guise of Vana, is blinded to the scientific reality that the gas is what keeps him enslaved. Everyone is using this kind of motivated reasoning, or at least the blatant rejection of facts, to hold on to their destructive beliefs. So on either side. And it's very interesting. I was just reading an article not long ago about how there are scientific studies about how we reject scientific fact. We start with our emotions, and even when presented with fact, and especially when presented with fact, the blinders sort of go up, and when it doesn't fit with our worldview, it doesn't feel good emotionally, we reject it. Mm-hmm. And we have that from both ends here, because Kirk, here's McCoy being rational with, look, I solved this, I fixed it, we need a gas mask, go down there, they're set. And here's Kirk saying, look, we figured this out. Here you go. Gas mask, put this on. You're good to go. Total rejection of that, because they would rather maintain, even Vana would rather maintain what's going on.
Yeah, no, you're not. Yeah. Well, I don't know that she would rather maintain. It's just, I mean, let's bear in mind she has had years and years and years of the whole gas thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Although they did say that she would be over it because she was up in the city. I'm not sure why she held on to it. I don't think it was that she wanted the status quo, though. I think it was still her distrust of, well, the man. And the problem is when Kirk shows up and he's all buddy-buddy with the people in Stratos, then he's obviously the man.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah. There is a great line, though, at the end that Spock has, which I really thought when he's talking to Droxine, who is not a drug. He says, there is great beauty in the knowledge that lies below. And I thought that was kind of nice, because people who reject the idea of having knowledge of things that are difficult or uncomfortable are missing out on the beauty of that knowledge. I kind of like that. So Spock had a good line. And I also admire Droxine's character change. On the one hand, she's kind of this spoiled princess. She's like somebody who was raised in Beverly Hills with no idea that, people in the rest of the world do things like clip coupons or wash their own cars. These things are just completely unthinkable to her. But you start to see that at the end, that she's actually going to do the work and go to the mines. And then maybe she will be that mediator, or at least part of that mediation process between the Troglytes and the people of Stratos. Who knows?
And Kirk looked at her and said, "You want to live like common people?"
Nice.
Yeah. That counts as singing for this episode, by the way, because
good. Yeah.
That's how Shatner did it.
Exactly, yeah. We also snuck in a little bit of an ecological message about the people of Merrick, too, and the very obvious dilemma that they're in. If all the plant life is destroyed, the people will die too. So
think anybody on Merrick too is like, where's my TV show? We nearly died here, and you just did 48 minutes about two groups arguing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he learned nothing else from this episode. If plants die, we die.
Exactly. If all the plants die.
Yeah.
Like if you kill a plant in your house, you should probably take better care of the next one, but don't worry, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's why I'm not allowed to have plants. And I think we all saw the hypocrisy coming right away, that Stratos is a violence-free area, and we keep it that way through violence.
Yeah.
Through the torture machine.
Yeah, it's another one of those, where we get to sort of, examine what we are as opposed to what we say we are. Where we are played by the supreme advisor of Stratos City. Mm-hmm. His daughter says they've completely eliminated violence, but, except for the torture chamber, where Droxine is actually watching Vana. So it's not even like she doesn't know. It's not like her father is keeping her hidden from this.
Right.
She's like, we don't have violence. Oh, this isn't violence. We just need this.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, there's nothing wrong with that, because it's necessary to keep their perfectly balanced society, which, of course, doesn't have violence, because this isn't violent.
Right.
It's not against what they are or what they say they are or who they want to be. It's just necessary.
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to that thing about the justification, the motivated reasoning, to say that we will maintain things, and we will justify ourselves into that position to say that this isn't torture, and what we're doing is not wrong, it's not inhumane, it's just the way it is, because they won't understand anything else.
Yes, there will be no burning this village to save it.
Right.
There will be shooting people so that we can, maintain the freedom of all people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good times.
Looking to help a society rebuild? There's work to be done on the planet Ardana. After recent years of political unrest, Ardana needs architects, anti-grav engineers, artists, miners, cooks, and more. In short, Ardana needs you. A new life awaits. Ardana is calling.
Another crappy season 3 episode.
What?
This is not. Look what I did there. Time now to suss out the messages, morals, and meanings of the episode and figure out whether the whole thing stands the test of time. It's subtle. Bonk, bonk. It's hard to tell on the head what the episode was about, John, but I don't know. Were there messages, morals, or meanings that you picked up anywhere in any of this?
I think there may have been the combo platter of morals, messages, and meanings in this episode. First of all, I will say that, to me, in terms of it holding up, this is one of the best season 3 episodes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the very best of Star Trek. You can see where there are all kinds of little pacing issues or oddities, but it is very, very good. I don't know that I would even start with this episode if I was showing somebody who is new to the show. But
no, you wouldn't. I don't think you would show this one. But it's sort of like, it's very much to me like we talked about with the "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield." This is not a subtle episode. This is written in crayon on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in big letters. Here's what's wrong. Fix it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what was so cool. So we got to tackle a lot in this episode, sort of this racial / economic disparity going on. You can sort of interpret that in either way, I think. Treating others humanely, being aware of these socioeconomic conditions that bring us the products we need. We didn't even talk about that, but we're faced with that all the time. You talk about people mining for diamonds in another continent, and we don't even think about that when we're going to buy pretty jewels in a jewelry store, so that I thought was an interesting idea of Kirk just going and say, well, we need this, and thank you very much, people of the beautiful city Stratos. See ya. We got to deal with prejudice. We got to deal with science versus belief again. I love Droxine's line to her father, "Are we so sure of our methods that we never question what we do?" This goes back to your statement about Star Trek asking us on more than one occasion, are we who we say we are? Right. And she summed it up there, and I thought stated it very, very well. And to me, this is sort of the great temperance of progress. We get better things all the time. and we get better at things all the time. Progress marches on, whether it's technologically or however you want to frame that. But we also have to accept the discovery that we may not always act humanely or ethically on the road there. So we have to turn back around and ask ourselves, exactly as Droxine did, are we so sure of our methods that we never question what we do? I think it's very well stated, and I think that is probably one of the great, if not the greatest, takeaways from this episode. How about you, Ken?
Well, the one other thing that I would add, and I certainly mean Mr. Gerald no disrespect, but I like the fact that it was a gas that you could turn off, because that to me is the other message of this. This can change. I mean, it does. I mean, there are two parts to it. The first part is you have to see it or recognize it or know that it's there. And then the second part is you can fix it. Now, it's not easy, and we don't know how it's going to be fixed. And just, again, to do the whole left, right, whatever thing, it's not, you can't just throw money at the problem, in the 20th, 21st, 22nd, maybe century. You can't just throw money at it. That's not going to fix it. Just like you can't just take these people out of the mines. That's not going to fix it. What that's going to do is that's going to actually wake them up. That's going to make them realize, wow, I thought things were bad before, but now I can actually think things are bad. I mean, they're not leaving them with a happy ending. They're not leaving them with everything. They're not leaving them with everything tied up in a nice bow. They're leaving them on the road to something better. Well, better for half of them.
Like a lot of other planets that we've visited in Star Trek now, it kind of makes me worry, and it makes me curious. What would this be like if we revisited this planet a year from now, 10 years from now, 30, 50 years from now?
Bunch of Troglytes licking their fingers, and Kirk going, there were people from a cloud city. Do you remember? Have you seen?
You remember that? No.
Yeah,
no. Doesn't ring any bells? No. Okay.
I'd honestly rather read the history of this planet than read the future of this planet. I will decide that, okay, this is all going to be fine now because they woke up and decided. And, it's another example of Star Trek, tapping on the TV screen going, hey, you out there watching, time to get up, buddy.
Yeah.
And sadly, 50 years later, it's maybe time again. I don't know. Yes, I think the episode holds up, and I've just volunteered to take all the hate mail again. Oh, speaking of which, if people want to send, hate mail or, messages agreeing, those would be nice. In fact, if any part of you agrees with this episode, please, send that in this week, because that one hate mail piece, Facebook, Skype, Twitter, the handle is Mission Log Pod. You can call us 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. You can email us. Oh, I guess I should give the address. missionlog@roddenberry.com. Remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
Ken, I'm glad to say that we will be back next week, and I'm thinking about doing a little redecorating. I'm thinking about the Savage curtain.
Some of the music for the Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Looking to explore the ruins of a fallen society? Look somewhere else, pal. Ardana is back and better than ever. Between the past and the future, between toils and spoils, between heaven and earth. Ardana is calling. Call your travel agent today. End transmission.